And at the point of serving the ad, we actually look at all these pieces of data on a per individual basis. And based on other interactions the person has had with your specific advertiser, we actually personalize that.
Welcome to Powered by Snowflake, a series where I interview technology leaders building applications and businesses on Snowflake. I'm your host, Daniel Myers, and today I'm talking with Shankar Venkataraman, Senior Vice President of Engineering at Jivox. Jivox is a platform for personalized content delivery and analytics, powered by Snowflake. Shankar, how are you today?
Very, very good today.
Thank you for joining me here today in the studio. I want to learn more about how you got involved in Jivox, and in your own words, what makes Jivox different?
So I joined Jivox about 6 years ago. Since then, I've been running engineering there at Jivox. Jivox is a very unique company in the sense that what we try to do is to ensure that we deliver the most personalized content to the user at the right time, at the right place, right? That is our focus, okay? So, for example, when you see an advertising, digital advertising, what we try to do is to ensure that we know who you are, or at least try to know where you are, and based on that, we will change the imagery, the content, the messaging, the click to action, all of the components of an ad at nearly the point of serving the ad. So it's near real-time personalization, essentially.
That's pretty exciting. And so, how are you using data to make that near real-time personalization?
So a lot of it is data, essentially, right? So if you look at an ad has multiple components, right? Background, foreground, CTA, messaging, etc. If you think of each one of them as a separate component, then you literally can feed in everything separately, and we assemble it for you in real time. Okay, this is very different from having to construct an ad, going to a creative agency, telling them to create, say, 5 variations. Now, in our platform, you can create 10,000 variations because as the more data you put in, the more variations you get. And we take care of actually handling those variations, optimizing those variations, and putting out product recommendations based on those variations.
Oh, that's interesting that you are creating the variations for the person viewing the ad.
Yeah.
So tell me more about how does that happen, or how does that differ per channel that you do it on, right? So my understanding is that you do this across many different channels.
This personalization is available across all the paid media channels, which is basically banner ads, video ads, native, social ads, for example, right? All of these are paid media channels. And then there's something called owned media channels, which is essentially email and site. Okay, so we can personalize the content. They are not ads on site, essentially. They're all content. And we can personalize the content across any of these channels. And the way we do it is look at the data. First of all, fundamentally the segmentation data, right? Which segment does the person belong to? Say, sports person, age 35 years, living in San Mateo versus a sports person, age 35 years, living in Dallas, for example, right? The location-based data is one variable there, right? And there's also multiple segments, multiple interests and things like that, multiple intent kind of things, right? All of these things are brought together as separate data streams, and we actually have all of this data housed in our cloud infrastructure. And at the point of serving the ad, we actually look at all these pieces of data on a per individual basis, and based on other interactions the person has had with your specific advertiser, we actually personalize that. So you might have gone to, for example, Nike.com as well as to Marriott.com, right? But we will personalize the ad serving for Marriott.com based on your travel intent, versus the Nike.com part will get personalized based on your sports intent or your clothing and sportswear and things like that, right? We will not mix the two.
That's pretty exciting. So really with that type of intent finding, you really need, it sounds like to me, a lot of context. And so how does Snowflake, fit into the tech stack of Jivox?
So where Snowflake helps us a lot is, so remember, all of this is coming in real time. So as a result, when you interact with the ad, there's a lot of interaction events which happen, right from the point of even you moving the mouse over, whether you are sitting on the ad for even a second extra than anybody else and things like that, or you're clicking and what happens to the click, where it is converted, whether you buy the product, all of this stuff is actually tracked by us. Okay, so Snowflake for us is the repository in which all the analytics runs. Okay, so pretty much we use it as the source of truth for all analytics data and optimization data. Okay, and that's where we deliver all our reporting information on from the analytics applications for, and this data is also then combined with other data. So for example, we have advertising data from when we serve the ad, but there is other data from media platforms like the DSPs and the CDPs and things like that. So they all bring those together in the Snowflake marketplace as part of the Snowflake data clean rooms. So we have a data clean room and Snowflake has a data clean room. So we allow you to port your data into the Snowflake data clean room. The other interesting thing which is happening in the ad industry is with the disappearance of third-party cookies, there are multiple identity providers like LiveRamp, like TTD has something called Unified ID, Newstar has something called Newstar ID, stuff like that, right? All these ID providers are also coming into the Snowflake data clean rooms, and we are also contributing our data into data clean room, and that enables us to allow the advertiser to bring all this data together in a very privacy safe, content safe, security safe model, and that's where we use Snowflake quite a lot.
For everybody watching that isn't familiar with the concept of a clean room, can you explain what that is?
So a clean room is, okay, let's take the world without the clean room. Okay, that will explain what the clean room is, right? So before clean rooms happened, right, what you had to do was each advertiser had their favorite vendors like Jivox, and we had to actually send our data into the advertiser. The advertiser had to create their own data warehouse and then had to do the joins between all these disparate pieces of data and ensure that this ID matched with that ID, this particular content matched with that particular content, this particular session ID matched with that particular session ID, all of this stuff, right? And they had to write umpteen number of ETL jobs to combine all this stuff together, and most of the time they probably failed, right? They had to make compromises here and there. What Data Clean Room allows you to do is, as a centralized data platform, Snowflake then says, okay, I know each vendor is asked to actually publish a schema or sort of a source of truth schema, and then Snowflake takes care of actually ensuring that these joins actually happen consistently and correctly together. So it takes the load away from advertisers who are will be out of their core competencies to do these kinds of data management. And this is voluminous data. Imagine as an advertiser, I'm actually doing about, say, 40 million impressions a day. You have 40 million rows of data to aggregate every day, right?
Yeah.
And that is a humongous amount of volume. In terms of petabytes, it's about a petabyte a day.
That's a lot of scale and something that really brings a lot of value to the end customer that's wanting to use this data to deliver those ads.
We have all these events coming in. So what we do is these events are pumped into our eventing system. Our eventing system is based off of Kafka. So we have Kafka event queues, which are then processed by a Spark-based processor, which then does the initial aggregation and then funnels it into Snowflake. Okay, Snowflake, that is the raw data. The raw data is then materialized into multiple views. So in the ad industry, we have this sort of the hierarchy of things, right? So you have something called the placement level view, then they have something called the creative level view, and then we have something called the asset level view. So imagine, again, going back to that ad template, right? I can track things at the overall creative level, just the ad level. Okay, I can track things at the individual variant level, and I can also track things at the individual asset level within the ad, right? So people normally do analytics at all these three or four levels, and then try to glean what is the best performing creative, what is the best performing asset in what creatives, things like that, right? Those are all things which the marketing teams are very, very interested in, and that is something which we are able to do it much better with larger scale as we are growing. I remember again, our history has been, we used to do all of this in MySQL, okay, way back when, okay, and as our volumes expanded and our company grew, MySQL obviously couldn't do these things. So that's when we decided to look at a complete warehouse solution.
From here, let's see a demo.
Hello and welcome. My name is Carson and I'm a solutions architect at Jivox. Today I'll be walking you through how you can leverage Jivox's integration with Snowflake to produce amazing visuals using your favorite BI tool. customers of Jivox can leverage our new integration with Snowflake Data Warehouse to pull reports. Jivox is able to capture and store information such as campaign performance, creative, asset level, and audience performance. Jivox is also able to provision a view within Snowflake for clients to access. As you can see here, we have a database called Client Views. And within it, we can see all of the different schemas inside. So I will select Voxy. And inside this, I have all of my views under this client. Each client who has signed up will have their own separate view so that they can only see what data they have available. So no data is shared amongst any of the clients. So inside this sample view, I will go to the asset view. I can see all of the different headers available for me to query against. So using Snowflake, I can run any SQL queries inside of this to pull any kind of information I'd like. Also, thanks to Snowflake's main integrations, clients can also connect their Snowflake instance to their favorite BI tool to build their custom dashboards. This is a great way for people who may be unfamiliar with SQL, as they can use the BI tools to drag and drop information to build out anything. In this walkthrough, I'll be using Tableau as an example to demonstrate how easy it is to connect Snowflake to Tableau. I've got a Tableau instance opened up. So what I can do is I can go to the server section, click onto Snowflake. I'll have my Jivox URL over here. So each client who has signed up will be provided the URL. I'll have my username and password, which I will just enter, and I will hit sign in. Now that I'm in the Tableau user interface, I can select the database. So these are the databases available to my account. So I'll click into Client Views. And this is exactly the same as what we saw in Snowflake with all of the different views, schemas, and databases. So I'll select the Vox one, and I can see all of the different views created for me. So I will go ahead and drag and drop this one. And if I go to Sheet 1 now, I'm able to see all of the different information available for me. So thankfully, using Tableau's tool, I can just drag and drop these inside of the columns, rows, filters, pages, and I'm able to produce any kind of graphic information that I'd like. On the last bit of this demo, what we'll do is I'll demonstrate the type of data that you can work with from Jivox via Snowflake. So what I've done is I've created a dashboard using a sample campaign via Tableau that I'll walk you through. In this sample campaign, I have 1 month's worth of data. As you can see in the different performance metrics available, I've got information such as impressions, clicks, CTR, conversions, and conversion rate. I've got different graphs available to me. For example, this impressions and clicks over time, as well as a day-of-week performance over here. So through this kind of information, I'm able to do different things. So I can see here in this example that on a Monday to Friday, the CTR is higher. However, on the weekends, both the conversion rates are higher than the weekdays. If I go to my next tab, I can check out the creative performance. So amongst all of this, I can see 2 different graphs I've produced. On the left-hand side, I can see asset performance by CTR. So I can see that through this information here, this copy, this call to action, this headline produces this 0.38% CTR. So I can see all of these different examples. So in this example, the bigger the circle, the better the CTR. And then on the right-hand side, I can actually see the call to action performance by click-through rate as well. So over here, I can see that the Shop Now one has the strongest performance of 0.29%, whereas Find During has a performance of 0.17%. Through Jivox, I'm also able to go down towards that actual asset level. So these are some of the assets that were used inside the campaign itself. So in this example, I've pulled out the top 5 performing ones, so we can see the various click-through rates across them all. Some of the other creatives had different assets involving rings, and I can see a similar type of performance amongst these as well. I can also go and look at audience information. And inside the audience information, I can see a breakdown of how well each audience performed. So I have 3 audiences in this example. I have bridal, gifting, and conquesting. Amongst these, I can see the performance of every single one of them. What I'm also able to see is the distance from store as well. So in this example here, I have 2 different sections. I've got the greater than 20 miles and less than 20 miles. In the greater than 20 miles, I can see that I've actually got a lower click-through rate and conversion rate than I have with those who are actually closer to the store. So from this, I can work out that the campaign works really well for people who are in close proximity to the store within a 20-mile radius. Both the clicks and conversions show this information. And lastly, I also have information to browser and OS performance. So in this example on the left-hand side, I can see I've got Windows 10, 11, Mac OS, and Linux, and then across that, all of the different browsers available. So with this information, I can see which browser and which with the OS combo has the best performance available. I've also got a breakdown of the different devices available. So if I hover on top of this, I can see that how many impressions were served for all of these different ones. So this is just a sample dashboard. You can leverage all of the different information available through Jivox and Snowflake and use your favorite BI tools such as Tableau, Looker, and various others as well to produce amazing visuals for all of your different campaigns.
Thank you for showing that. I mean, it really shows kind of the power of a platform like this for the advertisers and for the businesses that have this contextual data, being able to activate that data. From here, tell me more about how and why you chose Snowflake. You mentioned a few of the key scalability and things like that, but tell me more about, what was your process for choosing Snowflake?
Interesting process, right? So if you go back in history, so 6 years ago when I joined Jivox, okay, at that time I knew that we were actually starting to scale. We were doing a lot of aggregations, reporting analytics, dashboarding and things like that. And we were also doing a lot of log analysis. So we evaluated Snowflake about 6 years ago, like when Snowflake was a much smaller company and we were also a smaller company. And at that time, we just couldn't afford Snowflake at that point, right? And we said, okay, let us grow a little bit more. And then say just before COVID hit is when we were in the process of evaluating Snowflake again. At that time, we absolutely needed it, okay? So we knew that we had to get in. We evaluated Snowflake and Databricks, essentially. These were the 2 basic contenders. I loved the fact that Snowflake gave me a very industry standard query engine at a very basic level, right? I could actually deploy any one of my developers onto it and they don't need to learn Snowflake or configure Snowflake and things like that. So the fact that it was a ready to configure cloud-based platform, it was all ready to go, was one of the big things. And we went through a pretty elaborate proof of concept. We went through the 1-month trial which we had to do, and then we got all our complex queries running and we tuned it and things like that. Big thing was I think the support from your sales teams was amazing. Okay, it is one of those things which I talk about it even today to our sales teams. Okay, it's like how grounded they were. Like they were not pushing, but they were very sensitive about the fact that they needed to close this deal, but they weren't really pushing me, and they sort of got it right. And at the end, it was primarily the fact that it had an industry standard SQL interface. You were supporting all the interfaces which we needed from Kafka, Parquet files, etc., and the fact that we could scale with you. Okay, the big plus was depending on the kind of advertiser and the kind of data we had, we could provision multiple types of warehouses, right? Like based on the sizing. Right, so we have, for example, one of our customers is a very heavy load warehouse, so we provision say extra large warehouse, but for others a medium warehouse is sufficient. Those kinds of flexibilities optimized our cost model quite a bit. Okay, so that was a big selling point, and the fact that we knew additional things, like we looked at your roadmap and we said, okay, this is exactly where we wanted to go.
I hear that a lot about the Snowflake vision and roadmap, how the idea of the data cloud and what that brings in terms of value to really any data-driven company, how that is very impactful and how that's been actually a deciding factor in choosing Snowflake. So that's really cool to hear. Tell me more about 6 months, 1 year down the road, the roadmap for Jivox. What should your customers be looking forward to?
So we are just getting started, right? So to some extent, our big roadmap is trying to look at personalization for retail media and commerce media. From an advertising standpoint, from a personalization standpoint, that's the new frontier, right? You find people like Walmart and even Amazon to some extent, Walmart and Target and Best Buy and everybody else starting to monetize the data, because first party data is way more valuable than any other piece of data, right? So that is the big frontier, and in that frontier, Snowflake is a very important part of that frontier, because right now we have way more first party data coming in. It has to be secure, it has to be properly handled, and it has to be combined with other pieces of data in a consistent fashion. So the fact that we are on the data clean room is a big part of it, and the fact that the Snowflake is also a data broker for identity solutions like LiveRamp and Unified ID is a big selling point. So because ultimately I can then tell my advertisers, guess what, you don't need to worry about looking at how do you match IDs, because Snowflake already is a identity broker for these identity solutions. From a going forward perspective, we are very interested in the streaming aspects of Snowflake, which are starting to come through in your roadmap. We are also trying to become a member of your data clean room. So I believe that Snowflake will become an essential part of our infrastructure, right? And not only our infrastructure, but also our advertisers' infrastructure, our customers' infrastructure. The number of companies who are customers of ours, who are also customers of Snowflake, is a big selling point for us, right? Because we just tell them when they ask us, what is your data warehousing solution? Where is your data in? And we say Snowflake, and they say yes.
That's beautiful. I hear that a lot as well in terms of your customers leveraging Snowflake, and makes it easier for you to implement your product on Snowflake because of that data sharing capability. And same thing with, you mentioned the streaming capabilities, right? That's something that we announced at Summit earlier this year. We have the streaming for Snowpipe. So that's exciting to hear as well. And you even mentioned the data clean room, right? Things bringing that compute closer to Snowflake, right, closer to your data, with things like native apps, right, and being able to programmatically guarantee and ensure that the customer's data doesn't leave the customer's environment, right? That is a pretty powerful statement, and I think, I love the fact that you mentioned that, because I don't think enough people really understand the power of that.
So coming from a data background, I used to work at IBM, and pretty much my entire career has been mostly on the data side. This has been the utopia of every data company in the world, right? To actually ensure that these data apps are actually brought to fruition.
Yes.
And we believe that Snowflake, with their current strategy, gets us as companies, as partners with you, to get us to that vision. Okay? And that's why it's so exciting to be a partner of Snowflake.
And so, Shankar, if people want to learn more about you and about Jivox, where should they go?
The best place for more information on Jivox is jivox.com. The website has white papers, webinar content. It also has links to our documentation, both functional documentation, product documentation, and API documentation. And if you need anything more, just contact us through jivox.com.
That's great. And I want to say a big thank you for joining me here in the studio today. It's been great having you.
Great to be here.
And thanks to everyone watching. To see more interviews like this with tech leaders building applications on Snowflake, check out our other videos on YouTube and subscribe for new episodes. My name is Daniel Myers, and this has been another episode of Powered by Snowflake.